It is a great honor to welcome you all, those who are present here in person, and there are quite a few of you, and everybody who's also joining us online because we are streaming, and people from other ECFR offices and are able to participate in a webinar form. So we're filming this and we're here and we're virtually present. Today we are going to be launching a new poll that ECFR has published. This is a European poll that looks at the European views on a second Trump presidency and also many other topics. We probably will not be able to dive into all those topics because they cover pretty much everything that's happening in the world that is most pertinent right now, but we will be able to present a lot of the data to you. So we have chosen to hold this event in Poland to mark the Polish presidency of the European Council, a very important time for us, and at the same time to mark ECFR's move from the premises of the Batory Foundation to this very building, which we're very happy to also inaugurate on this occasion. And it seems that at this moment, all eyes, European eyes, are turned towards Poland. And from this office, we will continue to engage policymakers, opinion makers, and the wider public in Poland and outside of Poland in informed and challenging discussions that are the basis and the backbone of our democracies. The speed at which the world is changing, and as Ukraine continues to fight and Russia continues its illegal invasion of Ukraine and the bombing of innocent civilians every day, and Russia continues to violate European airspace, such as in Poland, and Trump is bringing out policies that change not only the United States, but also Poland. ECFR strives to engage to help Europe regain agency in this fragmented world that is marked by systemic rivalry. As European leaders lay down the foundation for Europe's strategy towards Ukraine, Russia, and the United States, we have gathered and synthesized what European voters think about the new US president, about Ukraine, about China, and Europe. So here to discuss the findings of this survey and as well delve into its policy implications, which are so important to us, are the Undersecretary of State at the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Jakub Wiśniewski. Please help me welcome him. And the rest of my colleagues have traveled from all across Europe to join us. The head of ECFR's Berlin office and senior policy fellow, Dr. Jana Pulierin. And traveling in from Italy, head of ECFR's Rome office and senior policy fellow, Dr. Arturo Varvelli. And ECFR's lead analyst on public opinion and senior policy fellow, Dr. Paweł Zerka. Thank you to all of you for joining us, for traveling, and for joining us on this panel. And joining us online, we have Professor Timothy Garton-Ash, Professor of European Studies at the University of Oxford. And he has been so kind enough to agree to join us online in order to set the scene for us and lay the foundation for our discussion. Before we dive in, I'm just going to very briefly, because I've been taking up a lot of time, so I'm going to be very, very brief. We're going to hear from Timothy. After that, we're going to hear from Paweł, who's going to briefly present the results, although obviously it's a very, very long survey, but he's going to take out the essential parts that we can then talk about. I will then hand the microphone over to the minister to take the stage and to react to what he has heard and present the Polish point of view. And then we will have a moderated discussion with all of the panelists, leaving enough time at the end in order for you here present in the room to be able to ask your questions. And we will also be taking questions from those who are online. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Timothy to set the scene for us.
Thank you very much, Marta. It's a great pleasure to be in Warsaw again, if only virtually. And my remarks have been billed as a keynote, So this is going to be the shortest keynote in world history because I've actually been given just 3 to 5 minutes. And what I want to do is just set the scene against the background of the global polling that we've been doing at ECFR together with our Oxford University Research Project on Europe in a Changing World over the last 3 years. Initially 15 countries, last time 24 countries in Europe and outside. Late 2022, under the impact of the full-scale war in Ukraine, what we found was united West, divided from the rest. So the US and Europe were quite united in their response to the full-scale war in Ukraine, but we found the other major extra-European powers, India, China, Brazil, Turkey, had a very different approach to the Ukraine war. Late 2023, we found a la carte world, a world of transactional great powers who were quite happy, rather like late 19th century European great powers, to deal with anybody and everybody, and in particular with Russia. Russia they regarded as an ally or necessary partner, perfectly happy to go on doing business with it, even though it was waging a brutal neo-colonial war against Ukraine. Fast forward to last autumn. So our major poll, 24 countries, 11 in Europe, the rest outside, really all the major non-Western powers, polling done after Trump's re-election, but before his inauguration. What do we find? Even more an a la carte world. So actually those figures for Russia being seen as an ally or necessary partner, majorities in India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Turkey all say, yeah, we're fine doing business with Russia. And they actually foresee Russia's global influence increasing. So much for the rather complacent talk of the full-scale war in Ukraine spelling a strategic defeat for Russia. What is more, they see China as likely to be the strongest country in the world in 20 years' time, stronger than the United States. What's the big difference between now and a year ago? The US under Donald Trump has joined those transactional great powers, right? And what we find is that most of the rest of the world is quite relaxed about having the US being just another transactional great power alongside China, India, Brazil, Turkey, and so on. The exceptions, Europe in aggregate, and South Korea, the other country that depends for the United States on its security. And when I say Europe, that very much includes Britain, which in this respect is the most European country, because it's actually the country most skeptical about Donald Trump. So we already saw that he was going to be ruthlessly transactional. What I have to admit we didn't anticipate was that he was going to start to talk about territorial expansion, Greenland, Canada, Panama Canal, and indeed suggest the ethnic cleansing and an American takeover of Gaza. What's the bottom line from all of that? No more united West divided from the rest, right? So what we found in late 2022 is definitely no longer the case. The US, putting it crudely, has joined the rest in its transactional realpolitik approach to international relations, at least for the next 4 years under Donald Trump, although let's hope not for longer. Conclusion, clearly, what we need more than ever is a united Europe to defend our interests and our values in this transactional Trumpian world. Unfortunately, that's not what we find in our polling in European countries. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to the panel to hear what we've found in our European polling.
Timothy, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
That is a very sobering analysis of the findings of the first poll. And it feels that very often, especially looking here from Poland, we are trying to preserve an international order in a world that no longer abides by the same rules and with a leader that does not follow these rules. So on the issue of being united or not united, and I hope that apart from the sobering analysis that we'll hear, we'll then quickly delve into a discussion on what it is that we can do in order to basically function in the way against these odds and in how divided we are. So now over to Paavo for a presentation of the findings.
Thank you, Marta. And it's great to return to my hometown for this conversation and to see so many friends, as well as my mom among the audience. At ECFR, we believe that it's important to understand what citizens think about foreign affairs. That's why we regularly commission public opinion polls in Europe and outside Europe, of which the latest one was conducted in 24 countries globally, including 11 EU member states. And we conducted it right after the American presidential election in November and December last year. Jana, Arturo, and I, we analyzed together the European data set from that polling, and we also were trying to understand what Europeans think about the world now that Donald Trump is again the president of the US, and we tried to also highlight the implications for policymakers. So let me share with you just three main takeaways from this analysis. And the first thing is that we discovered that people in every European country polled currently see the United States chiefly as a partner rather than an ally. So this is a question which we ask regularly in our polling, and not just about the perceptions of the US, but also of Russia, China, and other global players. But what was striking to us was that in every country, the most common response on what the US is to the European Union was that it is currently our partner rather than an ally. And in some countries, including Poland, this represents quite a shift, because in the past, people were in such places like Poland, but also in Denmark, Germany, or the UK, much more likely to consider America as an ally and not just as a partner. Still, we believe that this paradoxically constitutes an opportunity for a more pragmatic and consensual approach towards the US on the part of Europeans, which is the challenge of the coming months and years. Then the second takeaway presents a certain caveat to this finding. So this European consensus on what America is for Europe might prove to be short-lived if, in the meantime, the American administration manages to divide Europeans on ideological grounds. For the moment, there is still a lot of surprising unity also when we look at voters of different political parties. So, for example, if we look at Germany, the voters of the center-right, CDU, CSU, their perception of Germany has cooled down. They used to see America mostly as an ally. Right now, they mostly see it as a partner. At the same time, an opposite trend has happened among voters of the AfD, the far-right party, who currently have a more positive view of America than they used to have in the past. But yeah, we shouldn't live with an illusion that suddenly everyone is thinking the same way about America, because then when we ask not just about the US, but also about Trump himself, that's when we see that voters of the far-right parties and the nationalist right parties in Europe are much more optimistic about what Donald Trump represents for America, for their countries, and for peace in the world than when we look at voters of the mainstream parties. So this is, for example, a question on what does Trump represent for American citizens? As you can see, the voters of Brothers of Italy, PIS in Poland, AfD in Germany, they mostly have a very optimistic or a positive view of Donald Trump, which is not shared by electorates of the mainstream parties from center left to center right. We believe that, also, if you remember last weekend in Madrid, also the leaders of those parties were quite happy, were sharing their happiness about Donald Trump coming back to the White House and promising to make also Europe great again, together with Donald Trump making America great again. So in a way, we might just as well see the reemergence of a new transatlantic relationship, which would still be ideological, but simply based on ideology and values that are not part of the current or of the transatlantic relationship that we have known so far. Okay, and then the final takeaway I wanted to share with you is that Donald Trump, if he chooses to, might have ample room to divide Europeans on foreign policy questions, from the war in Ukraine to China policy to defense policy. He can also exploit the fact that Europeans themselves have quite a limited self-confidence and are quite gloomy about their own prospects. So let's perhaps zoom into the Ukraine war data, which I think is particularly relevant. There is a certain illusion of unity at this slide, which shows that in every European country where we polled, including Ukraine, people mostly expect peace negotiations as the most likely outcome of the war in Ukraine. No longer Ukraine winning or Russia winning, but mostly peace negotiations. And we believe that this is another effect of Trump, that he has made such a promise, something that people broadly believe will happen. But it doesn't mean that in Europe, people believe that this is the best outcome. So we can, for example, okay, but before I go there, let me just show that this represents quite a change. So half a year earlier, people in Estonia, but also in some other countries, were much more confident about Ukraine's capacity to win, whereas right now, most of them believe there will need to be a compromise. Of course, it's not just the Trump effect, it's also the reflection of the situation on the battlefield. But still, we believe that Trump has a certain impact here. Still, it doesn't mean that all of those Europeans who expect peace negotiations to happen would be happy about that. What we know is that, for example, in Poland, plenty of those who see a compromise settlement as the most likely outcome, this is the yellow bit that we see on the left-hand side, they actually would prefer Ukraine to win the war, believing that this would be the best for Poland to happen. And also, on a different question, when we ask people what would they want from Europe to do about Ukraine war more broadly, there are plenty of people in Estonia, Denmark, or Poland who would rather see Europe supporting Ukraine in continuing its fight rather than pressing Kiev on starting peace negotiations. So there are plenty of divisions in Europe already seen here, which Donald Trump could exploit. There are also further divisions if we think about the long-term policy of Europe towards Russia and Ukraine. And just one final slide. We asked a very simplistic general question, but still results are quite telling. We asked people whether Ukraine is part of Europe or isn't part of Europe. And as you can see, half of the population in France and Italy does not even consider Ukraine as part of Europe, which again announces problems in case we make steps forward in the enlargement process. So plenty of room for Donald Trump to divide Europeans further, but still we remain confident that European leaders can cooperate and can establish a joint approach towards Donald Trump's America. And in the paper which we published today and which we are going to discuss, we suggested what would it mean for Europeans to be more pragmatic and flexible. And we also suggested what would it take for them to use Trump 2.0 as a trampoline for a more positive Europe and a more functional transatlantic relationship. So I'm looking forward to discussing this in the panel. Thank you.
Paweł, thank you very much. And now to discuss the implications of this, it's quite a lot to take in. I definitely invite you to have a look at the whole report. There's much more data there and also an analysis. But now I will hand over the microphone to the minister, and I'll let you basically react to anything that you have heard, whether you have any thoughts on how it is that we could work together, or what this data, basically how it impacts policy making in Poland.
Thank you very much, Marta. It's always a pleasure to be here at the ECFR, to rely on your experience, expertise, your wisdom, and it's very much needed in these difficult times. I want to make just a couple of points and perhaps come back in the discussions. And please forgive me if I offer you a little bit of official line of a ministry. So, but it happens that I strongly privately believe in what I'm saying, and it always helps. So the basic point is that America is still an ally for us. It's a country which it's the best big friend that Europe is having in the world. And no matter what flaws there are in the bilateral relationship, no matter how sometimes confused we are when we listen to President Trump, we believe that this can turn out for the better. So yes, we get mixed signals at this point. Suspension of development aid from America is a complication for many countries and societies in the wider world. We get mixed signals about tariffs from America, but let's be clear, it could be much worse. And hopefully Ukraine will not be abandoned and there will be a constructive solution to the Ukrainian-Russian war. And yes, I agree that it's a test for European unity. I think ordinary citizens will soon come back to believing that it's worthwhile to have America not only as a partner, but also an ally. Public opinion polls, they always reflect some state of emotions. And emotions are good, but as we people who are married to our spouses, who have families, we know that it takes much more than emotions to have a meaningful relationship. It's also about rational realization of our interest and being there together in the world. And sooner or later, American administration will need us, and we are here for them. So this message, keep calm and carry on, is very important so that we do not create false track of so that we don't create context which would make the acting together in the future problematic or difficult. And I want to make a point about Europe also in a way. As EU presidency, we are excited and we want to show that there is a uniform solution response on the part of European institutions, but also member states. So far, the reactions have been very positive. What we have been saying as EU presidency about Greenland, about Gaza and the fate of Palestinians, I think it restores some calm, but also clear adherence to values, to multilateralism. We are there for the institutions such as UNRWA, such as UNESCO, World Health Organizations. We are ready to step in as the superpower in terms of development aid in the world. Sometimes we have as Europeans image problem. We already provide something like 40% of world development aid. So we are already the biggest donor. But we still find it difficult to communicate with the global South so that they appreciate and so that we become a little bit transactional, perhaps less transactional than pragmatic. It's time for Europe to react to the changing circumstances in the world, to adopt our policies which are less naive and much more focused on what we want as a geopolitical player. Let me give you an example. Global Gateway. This is a project which was established in 2021, which aims at connecting development aid with trade investment policies. So there is nothing wrong with us helping somewhere in Tanzania, somewhere in Mauritania, but also expecting from our partners certain good behavior as regards migrations, as regards accepting our investments, etc. And so to make a long story short, as I said, keep calm and carry on, and also ignore this information chaos. Sometimes the messages, the statements that we get from, say, across the Atlantic are for the domestic politics purpose, and we should not overly concern ourselves with certain rhetoric remarks. We should be looking for the healthy core of our relationship, which does not change. To give you maybe example and to conclude, in 1961, at the height of Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a very dramatic exchange of letters between Khrushchev and Kennedy. And it happened that on one particular occasion, when things were really bad, Khrushchev sent two letters at the same time. One was kind and full of compromises, and the other one was aggressive and belligerent. And President Kennedy decided to ignore this bad message and concentrate on the good, constructive approach, and this worked out. So I believe this approach of us Europeans in relations with America can bring good results. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, Jana, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. I saw you taking a lot of notes, so I'm sure that there's practically no need to gear up a question at all, because all of the things that have been said merits a reaction. So I'll let you have the opportunity to make your comments. You were also one of the authors of the report that was written, and also as a reaction to what you heard. Is keep calm and carry on the right way to proceed?
Thank you, Marta. And I want to start by encouraging you all to read the report. We have a lot of more data in there also on China and how much Europe is aligned on its perception vis-à-vis China. We also identify different camps within Europe when it comes to how Europeans perceive the European Union as a global actor. So just read the report. There is much more than we can discuss now. The transatlantic relationship is something that is very dear to my heart. I consider myself a dyed-in-the-wool transatlanticist. I was socialized by attending all sorts of exchange programs, and I have a lot of friends in the United States. I believe in the country still. I think it is a very old democracy with a lot of guardrails still. However, when I hear the situation could get worse or could be worse, and we're still at a state where, like with the tariffs, we see basically the same attempt that we've seen under Trump 1, and it could all get worse. I think what we tend to overlook these days is the rapid speed of developments within the United States. And I say this not based on our data, but based on my research. So that is what worries me actually greatly. The transformation of American democracy into something that assembles maybe in the end more the Hungarian model of an illiberal democracy. And we know for a fact that Viktor Orban's ideas have served as inspiration for many Republicans. So this is something where I think Europe has not really found an answer. What do we do if our closest ally outside of Europe is no longer a democracy the way we as Europeans think a democracy should be? But of course, I think what our report shows is that many European countries see the United States still differently. I mean, we have this convergence, and I think there is every room for a pragmatic approach. Still, I believe that you cannot now use Trump as a unifier for Europe. You cannot build Europe against the United States. I think this will not end well and will divide us, because transatlantic rifts in the past have not gone through the Atlantic, but basically through Europe. So I think we really need to be aware how much potential for division there is, and try to find bridges to overcome these divisions before they get too wide. So I think especially countries like France, Germany, and Poland need to get aligned in their perception, although their differences remain, of course, because we also need to be clear that we cannot build Europe with the United States. If Trump has thought about the EU as a foe during the first term and has called Brussels a hell house, I don't expect this to change. So there is a fundamental skepticism towards the European project in the White House right now. And that leaves us as authors of the report to end with, we cannot build Europe or European action against the United States, but we cannot also entirely count on the support of the United States for our interests and values. So that we need a pragmatic cooperation, some sort of constructive coexistence, which means not kind of separation of the two partners, but a partnership that is much more on eye level. And we've talked about this forever, but I think we really now would be wise to understand that time for patience from the White House is over. That is the other thing that I think Europeans are not getting enough. So it's first the domestic changes in the United States, but it's also the pressure on Europe. I think the times for patience and tolerance to wait for Europeans to get their act together and to transform their defense industries is over. So speed is, I think, should be our highest priority. And this is not for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. This is for yesterday to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Jana. Arturo, I'm going to bring you in. So you're coming to us from Rome, and Jana mentioned finding bridges. Is Italy such a bridge? Is your prime minister the one who's bridging it? And is this the way that we want to bridge the transatlantic gap?
So thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Marta, for having us here, and thank you all the Warsaw office of ECFR for organizing. So I'm coming to your question because is the most recurring question in recent weeks is exactly this, about the role of Meloni and Meloni government. And the question is if whether she will be a Trojan horse of the Trump and Musk, or on the contrary, she will be able to act as a bridge between the two shores of the Atlantic. Let's start by saying that I don't think at all that Paris, Berlin, or Warsaw need Meloni to talk to Trump. So let's define the parameters of this possibility of Meloni acting as a bridge between the two shores. At the same time, I would like to remind that Meloni, apart from Orban, was the only prime minister present at the Trump administration inauguration. So we also remember, on the other side, however, that Meloni chose to, I think, in agreement with Ursula von der Leyen, to support the EU Commission, and the last November voted in favor of the EU Commission, after having voted against in the last July. So in some way, the Meloni government position, and particularly the Brothers of Italy position, is changing in this period. I would also like to remind, sorry for this, but that it was Meloni herself who declared several times that if given the chance, she would play a role in favor of Europe with the Trump administration. For example, she stated this, she declared this a month ago during the press conference with Italian media. But I say she could actually play a bridging role, not so much because she declared this. As Italians, we tend to not trust the declaration of our politicians, but I think so because Meloni is well aware that European political and economic interests are so interconnected, are so intertwined that it's hard to imagine that a failure or a penalization of one European country, one European neighbor, will not turn soon into a big problem also for Italy. And if you think that for Rome, the first economic partners are France and Germany, it's difficult to imagine, for example, we can talk about tariffs, tariff hitting them without causing a big crisis also in Italy. So I believe that on certain topic, the tariff, for example, Meloni is somewhat obliged to try to mediate, try to negotiate, and try to have a role. Not on all, but on some policies, yes. On some topics, yes. We can expect her to mediate on green policies, for example, because she is totally aligned with the Trump administration on this, and she will use probably Trump to try to deflect the European politics towards the Green Deal or other green topic, green matters. But I think, unfortunately, she will find many allies in the EU on contrary to the green policies at the moment. I also believe that this policy of bridging the two shores of the Atlantic fits very well with Italy's traditional positioning, because Italy need both the EU and the US at the same times, because we are so dependent by the US from the defense point of view, and defense is a big problem for Italy, because now we are spending not 2%, but 1.5%. And you can understand that we have to find, Meloni government have to find a compromise with the European allies that spend more, and at the same time with the US, because it's impossible to think that we can spend 5% in a couple of years, because otherwise our public finances will blow up. So in any way, I don't see Italy being exempt, for example, from the upcoming steel and aluminium tariffs, no? that Trump announced. So I think we will see what happens. It seems to me that friendship in general does not save anyone from Trump's policies. On the contrary, it seems to me that many European politicians seem too confident in the long friendship between the US and Europe, in belonging to the Atlantic camp, to share the same value, the common value that unite Europe and US. But this is still a narrative in many capitals, also in Rome, and also in Brussels. But I believe that Trump is not at all sensitive to value talk. We underlined this in our conclusion, in our paper. I believe that Trump is not interested in this, and that is why we believe that an era, the the old transatlantic era is a bit over, and we Europeans need to find different arguments with Trump. Also by adopting negotiating technique closer to this way of doing things, probably. And that's why we insisted on the term pragmatism in the paper and in the title of this event, of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arturo. I'm going to hand it over back to Paweł for 1 second, because Paweł is not only our lead analyst at ECFR for the data and also a Polish colleague, but he's based in France. That's one thing, and you were also part of the team that analyzed the first part of the report that Timothy mentioned. So, and Arturo, you mentioned that friendships won't, the friendship that we think we have with Donald Trump won't save us against what is happening right now and what he still may have planned. So bringing in a question from the audience that is joining us online, and thank you very much. And if you are starting questions, I'm going to start taking notes of everybody who wants to come in. But first, bringing this question in. So let's not rely on what we think may be a friendship with the United States. That's what Arturo said. But does that mean that we need to make new partnerships for Europe? And the question is, should the EU seek to forge partnerships with like-minded countries like Canada outside of the EU to try to compensate for the loss of the US as an ally? So should we be not only transactional in our relations with the United States, which we all agree on, but should we also be transactional in our relationships with other parts of the world and forge new relationships?
Yeah, my colleagues surely have their views on this topic as well. I think it sounds perfect as an idea, but I have been recently discussing the fate of Europe's deal with Mercosur, which Poland is one of the countries currently blocking. I think it really sounds quite protesting against it, together with France. So I'm not pointing at Poland as the only country, but and Poland is probably mostly doing it out of solidarity with France. So France is the main guilty here. But what I'm trying to say is that yes, we can say that let's show that we can have new partnerships, and actually the Trump presidency in the US opened several avenues for closer relations between Brazil and Europeans, or between Europe and several other what we call middle powers. But there are those practical testing grounds, such as the EU-Mercosur deal, which the rest of the world is watching. And if we are showing that we cannot act where our words are, or if we get easily, like our policies get easily hijacked by interest groups in our countries, I think that we cannot expect that we will be fully taken seriously in other places. The focus of our analysis this time was not so much at the partnerships that we could forge elsewhere, but on how Europeans could actually act despite a flagrant disunity. So plenty of issues in the European Union require unity, and with Hungary and several other countries no longer playing the game so constructively, Europe needs to find ways of being able to act despite this disunity. This is a delicate issue. Poland is one of those countries who is exploring new formats. Today in Paris, it's Weimar plus formula. We have the meeting of the three Weimar countries plus the Spain, Italy, and the UK, and it's a consecutive meeting. Also Poland is in touch with the UK and with Scandinavian countries. We can see that there are various areas in which different European countries are trying to act and in a way go around this blockage, which is increasingly a problem inside the European Union. But I'm saying that it's a delicate thing because you need to do it without marginalizing the European processes and institutions. And they have important assets. European Commission still has important tools, so we would be stupid also to not to marginalize those institutions. Jana, Kuba, you had.
Mr. Wiśniewski, I'll bring you in.
Thank you. I just want to react very quickly because, Paweł, I think you're being unfair to Poland as regards Mercosur. Well, every good deal takes time to negotiate and enter into force. There are legitimate concerns for Polish economic sectors, for Polish farmers that need to be taken into account. I'm sure that sooner rather than later, the free trade deal with Mercosur will come into force. Second point on personal friendship, whether Madame Meloni can act as a bridge builder. Of course, we welcome every engagement, all hands on board, so to say, provided that she does not behave like Prime Minister Orban. So we expect European leaders not to undermine unity and not to undermine this, which is our greatest strength, which is our single market, our unity of ideas, of values. And I think it's not a coincidence that President Trump, on his first days, decided to go against Canada and Mexico as regards trade relations with them and not against Europe, because he's very aware that ability for Europe to strike back, to reciprocate, no matter how detrimental this would be to both sides, but he knows very well that Europe has wherewithal and has the resources to strike where it really hurts also American voters, who will very soon, in 2 years' time, will make another decision who will represent America in the House of Representatives and Senate. So that's from my side for now.
Jana, over to you.
I wanted to use 20 seconds, but now I need 40 because I want to comment on what Jakub has just said, because fine that you need time to negotiate fair trade deals, but I think speed is of the essence here as well. I was in Brazil a while ago, and basically what I heard was when the Europeans come, they talk forever. When the Chinese come, they leave the next day, and we have an airport. This world is not without competition and competitors, and the more we wait, the more room we leave for others to come in. I'm very much in favor of new partnerships, untapped potential. ECFR has worked on this. We have developed a multilateralism matchmaker and published it in February 2024. But when it comes to, would that help us to compensate for the potential loss of the United States? I think this is a different question, because I'm all for avoiding overdependence, and we need to look for other suppliers for rare earth and stuff also when it comes to China. But the United States is our first line of defense, and that is why we are so vulnerable. We cannot simply replace the United States with, I mean, no country can provide what the United States provides currently for European security. It's about the troops, it's about the military capabilities, the strategic enablers. But that is our biggest vulnerability. I mean, we could also be much more confident vis-a-vis the Trump administration. We could just, I think we could also be a much better partner and less a potential subject for blackmail if we weren't so vulnerable. So I think that's why we need to invest, and again, speed is of the essence, in European defense. And that should be our first and second and third priority, to get a bit more independent from US troops, from US capabilities, to be able to provide security and defense of Europe for Europe by Europeans mainly, and that is not something that you can outsource to any other country.
Thank you, Jan. I'm so glad that this discussion is providing real cases that we're talking about. Let's do this because we have another 15 or 20 minutes, which is not bad. I have a lot of questions coming in from online and questions from the room. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one question here physically and then one online so that everybody feels that they're in equal parts. So I'm going to start with Eugeniusz Smolar. And yeah, the gentleman is going to come over. And
It is 3 short comments. First of all, Arturo, if you are looking for someone in Italy to become a kind of bridge builder with the Trump administration, which is not known to be a bridge builder, you just arrested 105 mafiosos. They could be a very good bridge builder between the United States and Italy. It's a joke. But there is an element of it. That means if we are talking about transactional element, we are all fascinated by China, its development. But actually, since 2000, I realize, United States invested in China $1.5 billion, at the same time, $57 billion in Europe. I mean, if we observe that the big business in the US has an influence over the White House, so maybe there will be people who will make sure that Trump realizes that actually we are so much interconnected economically that it might influence. And I believe this is going to be the most potent way of approaching the problem. The bad news is Trump demands. He is not in the mode of cooperating or actually reaching some kind of a consensus on issues. Every expression, Vance in Paris yesterday on AI, etc., this is not by chance. This is a policy. This is the approach. And I fear that not only Polish government, but also some governments in Europe will be under terrible pressure, exactly on what Jana have just now described. Our dependence on defense, that Trump will come or a new ambassador will come and say, look guys, if you want our troops in Poland, you do prevent European Union to impose tariffs on us. I think it's a very realistic scenario. Thank you.
Let me take one of the questions online, and then we'll take these two. Thank you very much for that question. So continuing on the topic of defense and NATO EU. So obviously we're very dependent on the United States when it comes to our security, and I think this is particularly felt here in Poland very strongly. The question is, given the fact that this is actually a unique moment in history where there is understanding in Europe that we need to change this dynamic, do you see any signs that a democratic Europe will manage to find ways to avoid disintegration, fragmentation, and to be able to defend itself against Russia? In other words, is Europe alone with Russia? Does anybody want to take on those easy questions?
I can respond to part of it. The thing I want to comment on is that I see a lot of positive dynamic between European capitals right now. The time we are living could just as well be time when France comes out with a Schadenfreude and saying everyone, look, we knew it would happen, but we don't see Paris using such an argument. When the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski, says that we cannot defend Europe without the US, it's just one among many points of views in Europe, but it's respected. And we don't hear Paris saying that Poland has just lost the opportunity to shut up, as we heard 2 decades earlier. I think that there is an understanding between Paris, Warsaw, Berlin, perhaps also Rome, that each of us has a different history, different geographical location, and therefore different interests that impact on the way we react to Trump's presidency. I think that there is also an understanding that a lot of what we hear in the public space is just the international as well as domestic communication. But what I know is that behind closed doors, there is really an engaging exchange of views and an effort, a sincere effort of getting closer between Paris and Warsaw for sure, and I believe among other countries as well. With the new government in Britain, there is a significant effort to get closer with London and from London to get closer to several European partners. So I think that Europe cannot outsource its own security to anyone else and replace US with other partners. There is a job we need to do here internally, but I'm quite optimistic when it comes to what is happening in terms of at least this sincere effort on the part of different capitals of understanding each other better.
Very quickly, the last 30 years were for Poland about two things. One was to be secure, and this security was provided by America, 10,000 American soldiers on the Polish soil, and prosperity. And this prosperity was provided by the European Union. We will be the last ones to be forced to choose between one or the other. We want both. And diplomatically, politically, we will be fighting for these two elements to remain with us.
Jakub, the transatlantic relationship is not decided in Europe only, it's in DC. So what if we are just not having the same partner any longer in the White House, and the other side of the agreement does not consider Europe a fundamental security interest? So, I mean, Germany, I mean, I'm not talking for the German government, if there is still one.
There will be.
But the overall sentiment in Germany is exactly the same. We feel our dependence on the United States dearly. We feel that we are not a nuclear power. No German, I don't know, soldier, I think, wants to see the US leaving. But what if it's not our decision, but their decision, and they take a different route?
Jana, let me say, first of all, what do you want us to do? We keep calm and carry on, as I said in the beginning, which is we are investing into our defense and security. A lot of public money goes into military equipment, so we are getting prepared. We are also not neglecting European aspects of defense and security policy. And finally, we are looking at America the way it deserves, which is a very multifaceted, very complex political entity. Marco Rubio has been saying very sensible things, has been making statements which are very much up our alley. There is Senate in the US, Democratic Party, Republican Party, very sensible elements in this. So the situation is very dynamic. I don't want to buy logic, but we are now facing some dictatorship on the other side, some illiberal democracy. There are many vibrant elements in the US which we should cherish and welcome and promote.
Arturo, did you want to come in on this conversation?
Yeah, only. Can you hear me? Yes. Only try to reply about the fact that the US and EU are so interconnected that it's difficult to imagine that Trump hits really actually the European economy. So probably it's true, but the question is, are they realizing this? The Trump administration is realizing this or not? This is only a negotiating technique, or there is really something different between the two shores of the Atlantic? And I think one of the main things that differentiate this administration from the previous one is the fact that they don't trust in values. So I think that the Trump administration is realizing that we are living in a full multipolar world, and in some way they try to regain national interest. This is their mentality, their mindset at the moment. And the question, the minister said this at the beginning of our conversation, is a very good idea to the quote of Kennedy on the Cuban missiles crisis, no? But the question is now how many US messages we have to ignore, because at the time Kennedy ignores one message, but now we have too many messages to ignore probably. This is the fundamental question in the bilateral relation between the EU and the US. And last thing, if I may, is about the relation between Meloni and the Trump administration, in particular with Musk. I think that the Musk issue is particularly sensitive for Meloni, not just in business terms, but on personal level, we know, but also because Musk plays a role in introducing her to the MAGA community in the US. Under Meloni's leadership, Musk has become in Italy a sort of cultural touchstone for the Italian right. Because for years, Italian conservatives have struggled to find intellectual and cultural figures to rival the influence of the left-wing thinkers, etc. And Musk fills that gap, embodying a form of cultural futurism, no? Because technology, space exploration, free speech, absolute free speech, in traditional values, all these things all together are giving the Italian right a new cultural credibility. And so the relation with Musk is important also for domestic reason in some way. He's helping Meloni to create a public opinion, right public opinion, very close to her.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add, in order to, again, sort of underline the Polish position, which I think is, we find a lot of like-mindedness, which was also shown in the data, with the Nordic and the Baltic countries right now. I think that this is the place where we find ourselves in, that I just came back from Norway, and I found that the renewing or recalibrating of the transatlantic relationship, which is the terminology that they use, rather than talking about a crisis in the transatlantic relationship, is very exemplary of how close we are in our thinking, because quite frankly, as long as European NATO allies do not increase their defense spending and take their defense seriously, we continue to rely on the United States, whether we want it or not. And the Norwegians and Britain as well have a very similar approach to that of Poland. So I think building on the data that we've seen here, we see an emergence, which we already mentioned briefly, but really to drive the point home, we see an emergence of formats within the EU that are necessary in order to provide the sort of security that we need in order not to be alone in Europe against Russia, which, in my opinion, do not lead to the fragmentation of Europe because they do not undermine it, but rather just around different issues. But I apologize for adding that right now, and I'm going to bring it over to the questions from the audience once more. Marek Wąsiński, over to you.
Thank you very much. I have a navigatory question because European Commission published recently competitiveness compass, but in my opinion, I would say that it doesn't point very clearly in one direction. And my question would be, Jana said that first, second, third priority for Europe should be security. So I would have the question to others if you would agree that security, or maybe it should be climate neutrality targets, or it should be competitiveness. Because if we want to be pragmatic, and this is the title, maybe we need a clear unifying priority for the European Union, and what should it be?
Would anybody like to tackle that question?
I just want to say that Security Europe, this is a motto of Polish presidency, and I think it reflects very well how we see matters now in Europe. But in a way, it's a false choice, false dichotomy, security versus prosperity, because we cannot be safe unless we have resources to defend ourselves and to project our power in the world.
And now I'll take a question from online. So let's delve a little bit deeper into Ukraine in these remaining 7 minutes that we have. And the question that we have from some of our online participants regards Ukraine. Behind the scenes, are Ukraine and its allies working out what an acceptable peace agreement with Russia could look like? It's forging common positions in advance, will forging common positions advance the best response to Trump's proposal? So do we have a response to Trump's proposal? How can we change the course of what we see evolving over Ukraine? Jana.
Here again, I think we need to be pragmatic and unfortunately quite realistic. I don't want to pressure Ukraine into negotiations. I think a bad deal for Ukraine is a bad deal for all of us with devastating results. However, if Trump is destined to get a deal, if he wants to ensure that there is one, and I think that is the mood I got when I was in DC in December, the Europeans cannot do anything to stop the tornado. I think we need to go with the flow and make sure that the flow goes into the least bad direction. So there is a saying, either you're at the table or you're on the menu, and I think that exactly nails it. So I don't want to be on the menu. I don't want Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin decide about European security without Europeans being present at the table, without Ukrainians, which are Europeans, being present at the table. So I think it is really, really important. And here I'm with Jakub's strategy of embracing the change. So I think the best strategy for Europeans would be to say, Mr. President, we really hope that your attempt to strike a deal is successful, but we want a good deal for Ukraine, the best possible deal. And we help you as Europeans to ensure that you'll get the best possible deal. And here's what we can offer, how we can ease the burden on the United States. That's what we can bring to the table. And it's in your interest, Mr. President, that Ukraine is a sovereign and strong state afterwards, because you don't want to be the one who has basically thrown Ukraine under the bus or give it to Putin, because that will show weakness to the world. So this should be our approach. And I hope and pray that this works. But I think it's not really clever to suggest that we can counter basically Trump's approach by an offer that would support Ukraine. We cannot give Ukraine everything it needs. Unfortunately, I wish it was different. So here is a real dilemma, because what I hear from the Trump administration is they say this is on Europe. You need to provide the security guarantees, and we encourage you to think about troop presence. And there are, I think, two ways or two tasks. One is to patrol a potential ceasefire, but then I think there is also, if you ask me, a need for some sort of tripwire presence, which could be a European troop presence. The problem is that all the European countries I can think of, maybe with the exception of France, I've heard we need to be sure that in case Putin tests this, the US is with us. And I have not heard this from Washington. So my fear really is that we will leave Ukraine alone with deterring Russia in the future. The Porcupine model, trying to train Ukrainian soldiers, trying to invest in the Ukrainian defense industry, trying to equip Ukraine as much as possible, but without a troop presence. If you ask me, this is an invitation for another war.
Jana, let me tag on a short question from online. So one of the strategies, Trump has said that $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals in Ukraine could be something that he wants in return for defense support. Should NATO and the EU respond to this suggestion? Is this a way to recalibrate this relationship and have him in Ukraine? Yeah.
So, very short answer. I think this is a matter for Ukraine to decide first and foremost. And let's not forget, it was President Zelensky who brought this up first. It was basically the Ukrainian president making this offer to President Trump. And I think we are in no position to lecture the Ukrainians on this.
It was part of his victory plan.
I think we could also think about the frozen Russian assets again, honestly. But this is just a humble think tanker talking.
Does one of you want to come in on an answer on Ukraine, Minister? No?
I just want to say I agree with Jan. And also, the devil is in the details. We don't know exactly the parameters of this deal. Mr. Kellogg is in Munich. The talks are ongoing, but the details of the proposal and whether this will be acceptable to Ukrainians, first of all, remains to be seen. What is important from the Polish side, they have to be at the table. This must not be another Yalta, and that's it.
A quick,
yeah.
My French hat right now. So I think that France definitely sees Poland as part of the table, but France also considers this the case because it thinks that if there are countries who would offer troops in Ukraine, this does not have to be just France, but also Poland. I know that in the Polish public debate, it's a problematic issue. I know what has been stated publicly, but I'm still confident that some compromise solutions could be found.
So I'm going to take one more question from online because the participants in the room, I can see a lot of hands up, but we're going to be able to have a little bit more of a networking time over coffee. So you'll be able to approach the panelists directly, but our online participants won't have that opportunity. So I'll take another online question, which regards the pragmatism that you talk about in the report. If we strive to approach the United States with pragmatism, does that mean that we have to give up on principles of international law and the rules-based order as they stand in the UN Charter?
No, let me just say that we stick to the values. I cannot imagine Poland or Europe reneging on fundamental values that make us a member of the United Nations, that make us a signatory of human rights conventions and other agreements of international law.
I actually think this is a very clever question, and it's spot on. It's revealing European vulnerabilities because we want to stick to our values. We say we have a European value-based foreign policy, but we constantly clash. And I mean, we talk about a pragmatic relationship, pragmatic transatlantic relationship with a potential US administration, which talks, as Timothy Garton Ash has said, about ethnic cleansing in Gaza. That is so much against international law. I think this is kind of, you can find it in every book. This could be basically the definition of being against international law. And still, we are dependent and we still want a pragmatic partnership. So I think there is...
Have we failed as Europe on that particular question?
I think Europe has not survived the test. I hope that we will survive the test, but I think it's a tricky, or it's a clever question because it really reveals the trade-offs that we are going to have to make in the future. And the question really is also looking at, for example, coming back to the Mercosur agreement. When I was in Brazil again, talking about the Chinese airport, the Brazilians said, you come with high standards and values and what we need to do for climate and whatsoever, but we have other offers from other partners. And so should we stick to our values and have the best possible ideologically clean deal, or should we have a deal that works? And I think the question is so clever and so hard to answer because I think there is not one clear answer. I think it's a case-by-case decision, and we should not abandon our basic principles. I'm with you, but I'm not so sure that we won't.
Just on Palestine, Polish and I guess majority of European capitals agree with us. Two-state solution is something that we believe in. We don't actually even consider any kind of ethnic cleansing. We support UNRWA as European Union, as a majority of member states, and we are engaged with Palestine. We have been actually victims of, we have lost a lot of money in Palestine because a lot of European assistance, a lot of our investments have turned into ruin. We regret this, but we are ready to work constructively on approaches that will create the long-term solution for Palestine. And this is something that we are repeating. If our partners ignore it, yes, this is a very bad development, but we are not changing this position.
So much more to be said. We are 3 minutes over time. It's always very hard to have the last word, but knowing the data from the survey, I prepared a quote that is, I hope, what you will take away, among others, from this. It is part of a keynote speech that Prime Minister Donald Tusk gave in 2019 at the College of Europe, and we have a couple of students from the College of Europe here, so that's also very important here. And obviously, Poland has the presidency of the EU Council right now, so I think that's very appropriate to quote Donald Tusk. So in our thinking about Europe, we should be guided by our common sense and sense of timing. We cannot condemn ourselves to the false alternative of quick integration or collapse of the Union. Unity will not be built by extreme Eurosceptics or by radical federalists. It is worth rediscovering again and again the path, sometimes winding, sometimes quite narrow, that leads between utopia and dystopia. And I think that this very much sums up a way that we can, like you said, Jana, survive the test. It's not going to be straightforward. We are disunited, but there's a way that we can survive this test. So thank you very much to everybody who came in person. Thank you to the online audience and to my dear colleagues behind the scenes, to Daria and Nella and Filipa, who worked very hard on this. Thank you very much.